Eric Stoltz and Crispin Glover were right. They were so right. They disagreed with this ending. Crispin Glover hated that George McFly became a materialistic douchebag. He's like, money shouldn't be the reward. It should be love. That should be a reward. Eric Stoltz is like, this would be horrific. This would be a nightmare if I came back to an altered timeline. I don't have memories anymore, and this is a totally different family, and the world I know is different. I would have to adjust. They are right. However, they're also wrong, because this movie is not about the happy ending that the family is better off and whatnot. It's not about fixing the past to make yourself into a better future. This is all about the Marty McFly and Doc Brown relationship. Hey, what is poppin'? Corn dogs, we are back. It's 2025 and we are live, except we are recording a podcast for you, curated for you. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Captain Pop. I'm a maestro of the microwave. Catch me in the movie theater snack line, because I be getting them snacks and I'm looking like a snack. And right next to me is my best friend, numero uno amigo, the corn dog himself. It is that man with the G on his chest, because he is an OG and he's with me. It is Nick, Jerry, Corn Dog Justice. Welcome back in. We are so back. Let's go.
We are so back, and it feels like we never left. And also, I feel like I haven't done this forever at the same time. But I'm so, like you said, I'm so excited. We're so excited. I'm coming at you. I'm calling it 2025 Year of the Glizzy. I'm just put it out there right here, right now. And I'm your deep fried glizzy coming at you, as always. And James, like you said, we can't reiterate it enough how much we love doing this, how much I miss doing this with you, and how excited I am for what will reveal to you guys to be the first movie of the year for us. You really can't start it off with much more of a banger than what we're about to do.
And we started out with the franchise of the year, as we do every year. And Nick, it's time to announce what that franchise of the year is. It is on 3, 1, 2, 3. Back to the future. I got the light show in the back. You like that?
Woo!
You like that?
I fucking love it.
Yeah, getting epilepsy. Okay, so yes, we are watching the Back to the Future franchise this year on the calendar year of 2025. It is a smaller franchise, as we've done Mad Max, which is 4 movies, technically 5 now. And we did Indiana Jones last year, which was 5 movies as well. And this is just a little good old-fashioned trilogy, but it's a strong trilogy. It's one of my personal favorite trilogies. I love these movies. I think they're super fun, quintessential. Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, those are a couple of movies that I think are just essential to movie watching, and they just get me going and get me in the right mood of why I love movies and why movie magic works from everything on screen. Mise en place. Is that the prep your food? Mise en scène. That's the French term for everything on the screen. The mise en scène is crazy with movies like that. Spielberg is plastered all over these types of movies, and as we know from the Indiana Jones franchise, we're all about that Amblin magic, and this has got that signature charm woven into the DNA of Back to the Future. That is the franchise of the year we are watching, and hey, happy 40th anniversary to it, by the way. That worked out well. I think the wheel of franchises has probably got some sentience to it, because it knew I had this Lego DeLorean cooking up in the background and finally finished it. Check it out in all of its beauty.
Damn.
This is, of course, the movie 1 version, and check this out. Ready for this? Hit this button. Boing! Flux capacitor. Oh, yeah. So this will be hanging out in the background. I'm excited to be back. Welcome back. How have you been? How was your holidays? How's everything? I saw you one time in person, which is exciting for us because we live on opposite sides of the country. But besides that awesome night, how have you been? How was your holidays? Lay it on me. What's up? What's happening? What's up? There's glizzies in your trunk.
I'm doing great, man. Out here in Nashville, we got a nice flurry of snow. So I got to play around in the snow. niece and nephews, got to, play around with them. It's been great. Otherwise, just work, it's cold as hell out here. We're dropping down into the teens this week as we record, but really no complaints in life. I'm here recording with you. I've got steady employment. I'm watching movies in my free time to talk about. So what the hell do I have to complain about is my question. So yeah, things are all good on the Tennessean front. How you doing over there on that West Coast, best coast?
The best coast is crazy right now, and I don't know why. Maybe it's brazy, as we like to say around here. I think it's super brazy. No, California life is great. My wife is going through dental hygiene school, and today she had something called the definitive comp, which is a competency test. And you get to have 3 tries at it. And unfortunately, a couple of her classmates are failing. They're falling here and there. She was super nervous about it. She usually falls asleep on the couch at like 8:15 p.m., 10 minutes into putting on a movie. Last night, she couldn't sleep, super anxiety, stress-ridden. But she called me and said that she passed her comp, her definitive comp, the super hard. Give it up for Miss Pop. Mrs.
What
Popcorn.
A rock
Cup.
star.
Mrs. Cup over here.
Never a doubt, man. Never a doubt.
I just gave her a good old Steve Rogers speech, and then she passed it. There she is right there.
Congratulations on passing, Am.
Nick says congrats. So, yeah, everything's looking up for your heroes, I guess.
Jade, before we get started, I do want to we love movies here. We love the Hollywood area. Southern California, a lot of people in that industry. You were in that industry down there for a long time.
I was.
And just wanted to send condolences out, recognize, what that area is going through. I'm sure there's a lot of memorabilia lost, homes lost, memories lost for a lot of folks in that area. And it's devastating. So just throwing our hearts out here from JPI, from the Just Play It pod. And hoping that everything turns out well for everybody, and the best case scenario happens for all involved. And even those not in the movie industry, just living in that area affected, we're thinking of you.
Absolutely, well said. I like to shit talk the city of LA because we are Bay Area sports people, and it's
Absolutely.
a fun rivalry. However, I did live down there for 7 years. I do know a lot of great people, good coworkers, friends. Emily's family is down in Southern California. Only her grandma had to evacuate. Luckily, everyone's safe on her side. But yeah, there's a lot. Her dad knows a lot of folks that straight up just lost their homes. So the house is just burnt up, and that's it. It's gone. So it sucks. Wildfires are tough. And, when people don't help to make it better and they make it worse, that's just even a bigger kick in the groin. So yeah, definitely condolences. Thinking of you guys. Don't want the city of Tinseltown to burn down because we want to keep pumping out movies, and that's what that city's best at. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, just felt like for a movie podcast, it was worth saying, hey,
that was very sincere of you. We're usually so sarcastic and just brash.
I'm not a sincere person, but man, there's very few things scarier than wildfires, and the pictures are just devastating. So. Very moving.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
A lot of people down there seeing Instagram stories of just photos from boots on the ground. It looks like it's apocalyptic, and it sucks. So
yeah, it's awful.
Yeah. So I hope everyone's doing all right. But hopefully we can distract you and provide a little bit of escapism by talking about movies and giving our funny, stupid takes on them. So Nick, we are watching Back to the Future from 1985. This is directed by friend of the show, Robert Zemeckis, who directed Romancing the Stone, which we saw last year.
Absolute legend, Robert Zemeckis.
And this movie is written by a pair of Bobs, one of them being Robert Zemeckis and the other one being Bob Gale. More on them later. Nick, who is on the call sheet in this movie?
I mean, there are 2 big names here. If you haven't seen the movie, I don't know what you're doing with your life. But first on the call sheet, of course, is Michael J. Fox. And then, of course, followed up by Christopher Lloyd. Third on the call sheet here is Leah Thompson. And we have a few other folks that we'll probably name drop here through the episode.
Good shout out.
Yeah.
We usually do. We're like Facebook back in or MySpace, Tom's top 8 or top 8 of MySpace. We just have a top 3, we gotta, everyone's great, but we gotta just give you a top 3. Alan Silvestri is on the track. He is on that beat. And this is where he really just busted out of his cocoon and showed Hollywood that this guy can cook. He's mustard on that beat.
From everything I heard, there was a lot of skepticism about having him as the man with the plan for the score on this movie, but he proved him wrong.
No, yeah, it was all-timer. I think this might be his best work. And he's done a lot of movies.
Would you prefer your best work to be your first work? Or, because that's hard, right? You set yourself a bar.
I wouldn't mind it if I have other hits, because he composed the Avengers theme song, which made a freaking appearance at my wedding. Hello, Alan Silvestri was literally on the track via an audio player through his speakers. He wasn't there playing it, but we played the Avengers theme song. It was my groomsmen walk-up song. You were one of the groomsmen, so you walked up with the cap shield and the nano gauntlet and snapped away all the haters. And there
were haters.
He's that good. His song was in my wedding. So yeah. To answer your question, if the first one's the best one, as long as you have recognizable and respected hits after that, yeah, why not? Like John Williams. I was trying to make a comparison to sports. Like, is John Williams Tom Brady and is Alan Silvestri Peyton Manning? Like, two guys in the same era. Like, one's maybe like a clear winner, gets more accolades and more hits, but the other one's just as good. Like, is that a fair comparison? Is there a better comparison?
I think that's a great comparison, because you could say like Silvestri at his best was just as good, but John Williams has been the best for the longest. Exactly. I think that's a wonderful. If listeners don't know, we're huge sports guys as well. So
we're guys just being dudes.
As long as you're not the Eli Manning, where you just like, I won one big one, and then the rest of my career was like
that would be like, would you rather have like a super hit and then the rest of you is just kind of like
like a one hit wonder? Yeah.
Oh, Eli. Well, he did beat John Williams twice. So, but like. He did Forrest Gump. He did Ready Player One, which is a great score, very reminiscent of Amblin Charm. But no, Alan Silvestri is one of my favorites. Obviously, John Williams is like insane. Star Wars, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, Jurassic. Honestly, it's like Jurassic Park and Back to the Future, I think, are two of my all-time favorite movie scores.
Iconic. You don't want it to be good. You want it to be iconic.
So far, this movie's looking like it's in good hands. Well, when we get into it a little bit, we'll see how it's a rough ride to get there. But Nick, what do we have for the money to get us there?
So our money, estimated budget of $19 million, which doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of movies we watch from 1985, $19 million is a solid chunk of money to make a movie, but it really paid off because our box office worldwide is $385 million. And that doesn't even count everything else that's the licensing, the sequels, this movie has made, Lifetime, what do you think? Oh, well over $1 billion.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't even
look at your Lego set.
Number.
That's a licensed product. That's
a Lego deal. That's Lego money. That is Lego money.
Lego money's insane money.
Yeah. I own the DeLorean and Rocket League, it's all over the place.
Yeah, so 20 times the investment, and if you're making 20 times your investment, whew, good Lord, you did well.
And that might include maybe re-releases, when they say, come watch this movie back in theaters for a limited run. So I think that adds to it, but still, it popped off. And I think you might have done some research on it. I think it was approved for a $12 million budget, probably climbed up to 18 million. They're probably like, oh God, like we're going to really get in the hole on this one. No, you guys are good.
No, just trust your creatives. We say that all the time on this podcast. Trust your creatives. If you believe in them, let them cook. Absolutely.
Nick, this year we're going to do things a little differently. If you were just listening to our previous episode that came out, that would be the Wrap Party, which is our end of the year bash. where we get to celebrate all the movies that we have watched, and we can do awards. We do fictional tournaments. It's a fun time. Part of that is actually re-ranking some movies, giving it some second thought. And we thought in order to maybe whittle that down and have less rethinking and maybe get a more accurate number to start off, we're actually going to provide our scores on the front end. It's going to be called our pre-pop scores, pre-pop points. So cold kernel, if you will. But we're going to give you our scores at the same time. We're going to reveal them. We're going to write them down, show them to the camera. We'll say them out loud after the fact if you're listening on the audio podcast. And we're going to see if our scores change by the end of the discussion. So we're going to have our initial gut reaction, just hot off the press, feeling score to present to you. And then when we're done with this podcast, we'll have our individual final scores, and then we'll have our what we will probably have of a final score on average. So,
James, I love this. I personally myself think of myself as a big stuck in the mud kind of person. And you listeners and viewers might think, hey, they made up their mind before this discussion, but we really do change our mind as we discuss this movie and share thoughts. And I think it shows, again, not to get too philosophical, but the power of discussion and sharing ideas,
the power of love,
your perspective on things, the power of love, as Mr. Huey Lewis
and the news
would say to us. And he might say to us later on in this episode, but James
might say it's just too darn loud. Who knows?
Let's go ahead and do this for the first time in JPI history.
Our first concurrent reveal. Nick, 3, 2, 1, reveal. Oh,
okay.
Wait, you threw me. Oh, you threw me in the beginning because you're like, does this look like a 7? And I was like, is that his fucking score for this movie? That's weak. Okay.
Well,
Nick, you're holding up an 8.8. I held up an 8.6 with room to go higher because I want to start out a little conservative. Don't want to come out the gates too hot, but I like where this is going.
I do too. Now, part of me wrote down that 8.8 pretty early because I didn't know if the video mirror was the video was a mirror image. So I thought 8.8 was going to be the same.
This will be safe.
Either way.
It's the only number besides 1.1 that'll be safe.
Yeah. For those of you listening on or watching on the YouTube channel, and if you're not watching on the YouTube channel, you should go check out the YouTube channel. Abso-freaking-lutely. Just play it.
Oh, yeah.
So, but no, I'm surprised I came in higher than you. I know how much you love this movie, and I came in maybe a little high, maybe a little room to negotiate down to you, or even go up from here. Who knows?
I just didn't want to scare you. I didn't want to scare you.
know.
So, I mean, James, honestly, I could see it going that way. So, but we'll discuss it. We'll see if it deserves that 8.8 and 8.6, 8.9. We'll get there.
Because you put an 8.6, which was a little not low for you, but I know, again, as someone who knows how much you love this movie.
Yeah. Honestly, it's for room to go up. I just didn't want to come out looking like an idiot. So I was like, you know what? Let me justify this 8.6 and then hopefully ramp it up to your territory. So Nick, there's nothing left to do, but let's read the log line and let's talk about how this movie got made, and we'll get into the story of it. I think a lot of people have seen this movie. If you're even listening to us, you definitely have watched this movie. If you haven't watched this movie, you have to watch this movie. So we'll go
pause the episode and watch the movie right now. What are you doing?
Living under a rock. This is a classic. Come on now. So Nick, let's read the log line, and then I would love to talk about the development of this movie, and then we'll get into some good old fashioned plot talk, as everybody loves. So go ahead, hit me.
Marty McFly, a 17-year-old, high school student, is accidentally sent 30 years into the past in a time-traveling DeLorean invented by his close friend, the maverick scientist, Doc Brown.
Yes. Okay. All right. So, Nick, before we get into plot talk, I just want to go over some development fun facts, how this came to be, why it came to be. I love this stuff. If you haven't checked out the documentary, The Movies That Made Us, there's a great little, just easy to watch 49-minute episode on the development of this movie. So A lot of the information I'll get is from there. I'm not going to dwell on it too much because obviously you can watch it. It's great. You don't need me to rehash it for you in a non-exciting way, but I will give out some interesting tidbits about how this is related to us. And you know what I love about this movie, Nick, besides that it's fantastic?
Tell me.
I love how it really is a small Hollywood after all, because this movie is heavily interconnected with the previous movies that we have watched on this podcast and have discussed. For example, like we said, Alan Silvestri is on the track and he did the score for the movie Romancing the Stone. Now, if you recall from that episode, I said that it sounded very funky, like fast beat funk action, very Seinfeld, but like a 70s TV show. And it makes sense because I learned that he did the TV show Chips. He did Starsky and Hutch. And there's another one that's like kind of like up that alley. So that was he was doing TV scores, just like like really just like kind of cheesy 70s. And when Chips got canceled, he got put on to Romancing the Stone by one of his music supervisor guys or whatever. And he met Robert Zemeckis. And they have been like that ever since. So
I love
just
when they
like
do that.
What John Williams is to Spielberg, Alan Silvestri is to Robert Zemeckis. When Robert Zemeckis is directing a movie, Silvestri he's there. He's doing the score, which is great. I love that. And it's kind of like when I'll touch upon how Robert Zemeckis was almost there's a conspiracy they're trying to sabotage him with this movie and talk shit about Romancing the Stone, how it was going. I think it carries a lot of weight knowing that Alan Silvestri came off a canceled show, just got assigned to this project, and Robert Zemeckis got assigned to this movie, and everyone didn't have faith in it, and it did really great at the box office and critically was received very well. So kind of touching upon the backstory and again, getting a lot of information from that Netflix documentary, The Movies That Made Us. So Robert Zemeckis, Bob Gale, they're the writers. They're guys, just like us, Nick. When they're in college, they're not concerned about the new French wave of cinema. And they said that they just want to make regular movies for regular people.
Just guys being dudes.
Who does that sound like?
That sounds like us, buddy.
Remember we made a short film and when I was in college, remember at the screening, what can you describe all of the rest of my classmates' movies? Like just tone, genre. There's a couple good ones, fun ones in there, but yeah.
I'd say overly artsy, trying too hard, convoluted. One of those movies, like when Shape of Water wins Best Picture and they go, "Oh, you just don't understand art." Felt like there was a lot of people trying to do that. People were trying to be the next, French silent film producer. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And then your movie comes on, and what was it?
So my teacher said, "Hey, we're doing an 8-minute short film. Short films should not have a beginning, middle, end." Okay. And what do I fucking do? I make a beginning, middle, end. I make a tiny action movie and everybody loved it. Everyone had a great time. I'm not saying it was good or better than the other short films. I'm sure if someone were to watch all them,
I'll say it.
I'll rest my case. So yeah, Bob Gale, Robert Zemeckis, they're buddies in college. They are just like, we don't want to do that. We want to make fun movies. We want to make movies that people want to go see. So they actually write the movie 1941, which is like a wartime comedy, I think, maybe spoofy parody. And we might have shouted this out on the Duel episode, but that was actually a Steven Spielberg directed movie. So he did that right after Duel, after he got his big break. And Steven Spielberg loves the movie. He loves the script. So he directs this. And then fun fact, the reptile gas station lady from Duel makes a cameo in 1941, basically playing the same character. John Belushi rolls up in an airplane and he's like, "Fill her up, Ethel." So Steven Spielberg putting little Easter eggs in there.
I love when they do that.
Not fun fact, this movie flopped. So not good for Bob Gale, not good for Robert Zemeckis. Spielberg can kind of wear it because he made Duel and that was pretty sick. All that hoity-toity garbage they didn't like in college, they show Steven Spielberg their thesis film that got a B+, and Steven Spielberg loves it. So it gets his approval, and just how the exec at Universal gave Spielberg his approval from his Amblin short film, which kind of got him a contracted director's gig for directing TV specials. They get the Spielberg approval. Steven Spielberg says, "Hey, this is Zemeckis guy. He's a director. Like, he has vision, so he should definitely be in the chair." And Bob Gale is like, "I want to be a writer, so this is perfect." So what they do next is Zemeckis directs a movie called "I Want to Hold Your Hand." It flops. I actually shouted this out in the Romancing the Stone episode.
Can I give you a little bit of a fun fact about this movie when they pitched it?
Please.
Initially, when they pitched this movie, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," that the executive that they pitched this to threw the script on the ground and cursed them out of his office for the "I Want to Hold Your Hand" script.
He Andy Samberg'd it?
He did. He was so upset. He was so hot about this. That guy's name was Ned Tannen. He is the inspiration for Biff Tannen in Back to the Future.
That is a fun fact that I didn't know. That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Shout out Prime Video for their fun facts during the viewing.
Shout out Prime. Not sponsored, but we could be. That flops. Gale and Zemeckis give it one more go with Kurt Russell's Used Cars. It's mediocre. It's lukewarm received. So we got strike 1, strike 2, and then Columbia Pictures actually commissions them to write a script. So this is now, it's like, all right, third time's the charm. Let's do this. Bob Gale goes back home, finds his dad's yearbook from high school, says it's about 30 years removed from when he's looking at it. He says, I wonder if I would be friends with my dad in high school. And boom, idea is born for this movie. So we can spark it off and spin it off from there as much as we want. So Bob Gale is actually bringing this idea to the table. They write a as they say, quote unquote, half-baked idea script, and they bring it to Columbia Pictures. And Frank Price, head of Columbia Pictures at the time, he likes the idea. And Nick, I'm not expecting you to know who Frank Price is, but if you recall from...
Sounds familiar.
A movie we watched last year in the podcast and how it relates to this. So Columbia actually owns the script, but they don't move forward with it initially. More on that later. So Frank Price, you might recall him from a discussion we had on our Leonard Part 6 podcast, where he left Columbia Pictures in 1983 after not jiving with the new owners of the company, which was Coca-Cola.
It's all coming back.
Remember, they went through like 3 studio heads. So Frank Price is like, I'm out. I don't want to be run by a soft drink company. This is a cool script, but I'm out. So enter Romancing the Stone. Fox doesn't have faith in this project. So they're like, let's give it to that Bob Zemeckis guy. He'll be a fall guy because he directed I Want to Hold Your Hand and Used Cars, and those both sucked. So if this sucks, we'll just say it was that guy. If you recall in the Romancing the Stone podcast, he's coming off those 2 flops. And the head of Fox at the time strategically places Zemeckis in the chair in case it goes under. So they could just kind of throw him under the bus and say, hey, there's that guy that had 3 flops in a row. It wasn't us. Remember that he actually lost the directing job to 1985's Cocoon to Ron Howard due to all this behind-the-scenes slander at the time. This was brought up in our Romancing the Stone podcast. Reverse Uno card is pulled. RTS slaps. And we are so back to the drawing board for Back to the Future.
But not for me.
Oh, man. So then Cocoon actually was like, sorry, you want to do this still? And then he's like, nah. So now the Bobs, they got the juice to pursue their Back to the Future dreams, get that back off the ground, hoverboard style. So Spielberg, he had already set up Amblin Entertainment at Universal. And who's the new head of Universal? None other than Frank Price, our Columbia buddy, who initially liked the idea, which is cool.
Oh, shit.
So sick plot twist. He's still down to time travel. The downer, Columbia still owns the rights. So you're probably wondering, why did Frank Price commission the script, like the script, but not move forward with it at Columbia? Because he knew he wasn't going to be there. So he's like, why would I move forward with a movie that I like, that's going to be at a future rival company, since I'm going to Universal, I don't want to, like, this is good, but let's not give Columbia this.
Question.
Yeah.
Just something I noticed during the movie, watching Back to the Future. Everything is a Pepsi product. Is that intentional? With Mr. Price's hatred of the Coca-Cola takeover? I noticed that everything is like, give me a Pepsi free. Give me a Pepsi.
Free, yeah.
I wonder if it was just free product placement, like just to piss off Coca-Cola.
Well, I mean, that would make sense. Funny. Well, that would make sense, because why would you push Coca-Cola products when you don't have to? Columbia would do that.
That brings me that kind of click. That's funny. All right, moving on.
That brings me to my my actually question for you, a what if question. So how awful would it be if this movie was overseen by the Coca-Cola Columbia studio and overseen by Guy McElwain, who was the Frank Price replacement, who greenlit Ishtar, which was a huge bomb.
No.
So how, like, so just like this movie, you know, when they say, hey, go back in time, you alter something, like, what does that new timeline look like? What does Back to the Future look like under the Columbia Coca-Cola overlords? What is that movie? Is that absolute? Is that like Wraith status now? Is that like Black Moon Rising?
We're going to go over it later in this podcast, but you'll find out that Back to the Future, while filming, had a lot of suggestions from executives at the company that Spielberg went ahead and shrugged off and said, not a chance. I think a lot of these suggestions would have had to have been taken by this overbearing company, and it just would have been a lot of product placement like we saw in Leonard. It would have been just awful, cheesy, bad. I mean, we wouldn't have gotten Back to the Future.
Are in the wrong place.
Might not even gotten Michael J. Fox to come in, because he had kind of a tumultuous way of being brought into the movie as well. So, it just would have been mismanaged top to bottom.
Let's talk about that exec. Sid Sheinberg, head honcho guy at Uni. We're going to throw shade his way on this episode, but he also did get Spielberg his job. He is a mentor for Spielberg. So it's got to be a little bit of a love-hate relationship with Sid Sheinberg here. You know, he got Spielberg his start, which gave us Duel, again, tying back to our podcast. But he's going to be the overseer of Back to the Future. But apparently he wanted it to be called Spaceman from Pluto. Sheinberg, come on now.
The memo he sent out, and I'm sure you're going to paraphrase it here in a minute, but it's just absolutely, it's the reason we yell.
This is all you. This is all you.
Is it me? I screenshotted it. I screenshotted this damn memo because it's just so ridiculous. So Mr. Sheinberg says in a memo to Mr. Steven Spielberg, October 17th, 1984, he says, although I believe that the present draft is terrific and I marvel at the improvements that have been made from the Columbia version. And now that you explained that, that makes sense. I was like, what's the Columbia version? So now this all checks out. He says, I continue to believe the title leaves much to be desired. There are a number of reasons why I found the title less than quote unquote wonderful, but my primary concern is that it appears to make the picture a genre picture. I think the script and hopefully the film deserve a better title. Now that I have buttered you up, I would suggest we consider the title Spaceman from Pluto.
Bruh.
Underpinning these suggestions are the following thoughts. Modify the dialogue on page 35 so that Sherman calls Marty a spaceman from Pluto. Modify Marty's dialogue on page 77 so that he identifies himself as a spaceman from the planet Pluto. Change the title of the book written by George and referred to on page 130 from A Match Made in Space to Spaceman from Pluto. And then he goes, obviously you get the idea. I am sure there will be those who will argue that the movie will appear to the audience to be a cheap, old-fashioned sci-fi flick. Nonsense! I think it's got a title that has, quote-unquote, heat, originality, and projects fun.
Dude.
I don't know why he's quote-unquoting himself.
How do you do, fellow kids, is what this is telling me.
Most importantly, I think it avoids the feeling of a genre time travel movie. James, what did Spielberg have to say to this?
This was really great and pretty genius and got the job done. He just replied back. He said, "Hey, Sid, thanks for the hilarious memo. We all got a great laugh about it. We're going to keep doing what we're doing." And then he didn't hear anything. He didn't hear anything back from Sid.
Hey,
that's effective.
Props to Scheinberg, because sometimes it takes a leader to swallow your pride and your ego. You got clowned on a response and you went, okay,
all right.
I'm going to walk away from this. Okay. I'm going to walk away from this one. So he went out there. He put his big boy pants on, sent a big boy memo out.
Total backfire.
And, but again, good for Scheinberg for being like, okay, I'll let it go.
That also echoes Steven Spielberg is obviously he's going to be executive producer on this movie. So that also just shows you how much game Spielberg has, even at a young age. You know, he did come out with Jaws at this point. Raiders is obviously out at this point. So he does have say in the game. And that's just a great way to handle that situation. Christopher Lloyd was actually recommended for the part of Doc Emmett Brown to Zemeckis by producer Neil Canton, because of his work on The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, which is another movie that we watched and talked about. This is super
John
interconnected to our stuff. Enter Eric Stoltz. I did mention this on some podcast before. It might have been the Romancing the Stone podcast. I don't know. Talking about Zemeckis, talking about something. But he was originally cast as Marty McFly. He basically, the long and short of it is, everyone said to him, it's not that deep, because he was approaching the project that it was a tragedy. It would be creepy to go back in time and change the past, and then you come back to a future and you have memories that don't exist, and you have to adapt to this new family. And everyone's like, whoa, Eric, we're trying to make a fun movie. You're bringing the mood down. Like you're taking this way too seriously, dude.
It's not that deep, pal.
It's not that deep, guy. You know, he's from the movie Mask, the Elephant Man, aka. So he's a serious actor, and this is another Sid Sheinberg. Like, we got to put Eric Stoltz in there. He's a great actor, even though Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis wanted Michael J. Fox from the get-go. They were like, we want this kid from Family Ties. He is physical. He's funny. He's charming.
He's got it.
He can pull this off. And Sid Sheinberg's like, nah, I like this Eric Stoltz guy. And he says, if it doesn't work out with him, you can start all over. So they're like, okay. I mean, we're not going to do that, but you technically said that. Eric Stoltz, he does do the 5 to 6 weeks on the shoot. The higher ups, the creatives just said, this is not it. This is not what we want. And they end up getting Michael J. Fox, who was on an insane schedule, because they had to basically go on hands and knees and beg the showrunner of Family Ties and say, look, can we please have Michael J. Fox? I know he has priority with the show, but we think he's perfect for the job. So according to the Movies That Made Us documentary, they go in, they plead their case. Showrunner says, if Michael wants to do it, he can do it, but this comes first. So Michael J. Fox is brought in. He thinks he's getting fired, but they say, hey, this is Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. They want you to star in this movie. Here's a script. Read it over. Let them know by tomorrow. And then apparently he looks at a script for the Back to the Future and looks at a Family Ties script and sees that this is this thick and this is this thick and says, yeah, I'll do this. He's like, I'm in.
Smart man.
So Michael J. Fox, throughout this entire movie, he is shooting Family Ties Monday through Friday in the daytime. And then he's being transported to the Back to the Future set, and he is shooting at night, and probably is running on 3 hours of sleep every single day. The daytime exteriors are shooting on the weekend. So this is a 7-day-a-week affair. I would have hated working on this movie. I would have been like, why is this such a shit show? Why are we on a time crunch? It's because they had the makeup and ground for shooting for 5 weeks with Eric Stoltz. They added another $5 to $6 million to the budget. So that $18 million budget, $19 million budget makes sense now, because it was originally approved for $12 million. So they had to go back, reshoot all this stuff. And as soon as Michael J. Fox is on the set, it straight up works. And they're like, this is the movie we wanted to make. So this is
awesome. Got the magic, baby.
We got it. We got the magic. We got the juice. And Nick, I think let's just jump into plot talk. Let's hit some more fun facts along the way. You should be very familiar with the story. If not, we'll hit on some key points here. But yeah, let's do this. First time, 2025. It's plot talk.
Plot talk.
You Love it. Now, this is going to be a more abbreviated plot talk because, like we said, everybody should know this movie. Again, if you haven't seen this movie, stop, pause, go lock yourself in a room, put this movie on, watch it. You'll thank yourself. You'll thank us. You'll absolutely thank us and show your eternal gratitude by subscribing to the podcast. Would you? Now, for the plot talk here, we're just going to kind of hit your highlights and we'll talk about things we loved and things we noticed along the way. But our guy, Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox, he kind of has a shitty life. He has some shitty parents. His mom, this is Leah Thompson, and his dad, which is Crispin Glover, went through a lot of makeup. I love something I'm going to just talk about this movie all the time. What makes it great is the attention to detail. They didn't cut corners. So they put Leah Thompson and Crispin Glover in makeup for a long time. They didn't get other actors to play his parents. These are same actors who play young parents as old parents. Mom's an alcoholic. Dad's just a pushover. His boss, Biff Tannen, who we mentioned earlier, comes into his house. This is guy coming into his house and bossing him around and drinking his beer out of his fridge.
Talking about clowning a guy.
Marty does not respect his father, which would probably be the worst feeling as a father, to know that your children just do not respect you at all.
I was going to say the makeup was good. The only nitpick I have for that is the neck makeup. It was so noticeable, especially on Strickland, because there's multiple characters that we know in 1985, and then we also know their younger, quote unquote, 1955 counterparts. So that close up of when the principal Strickland is like in Marty's face, calling him a slacker. It's so stretchy looking and artificial. It distracts me every single time. But that's just a nitpick for the makeup.
It's just a whole setup. Marty rides his skateboard. He's a slacker. He's late to school. It's a very stereotypical 80s high schoolish movie.
Nick, it's so good because like when we start out, obviously we're beating you over the head with themes here. So first shot is a oneer. Walks into Doc Brown's lap. Clocks galore. There's actually a clock with a kind of guy hanging from one of the minute hands, a little foreshadowing for what's happening at the end. Marty comes in and just is like, "Hey, Doc, you here?" And we know he's a musician, so we get that he plays guitar right off the rip because he plugs into an amp and plays a note, and it's a huge amp. And Nick, what is he cranks it up to one of our favorite movies ever, right?
Maximum Overdrive.
Maximum Overdrive. Plays a chord and just gets blown back straight across the
Some
lab.
might say he gets yeeted across the
I
lab.
would say that he gets yeeted across the lab.
Darn out there.
But you're wondering why is there a big amp in Doc Brown's lab, his garage? And you come to learn that these guys are really close, and so he probably built it for Marty. They're homies, they're prodigy, their mentor. Their relationship is so funny; it's unexplained. There's a John Delaney stand-up bit when he talks about this. He says, "Yeah, and Back to the Future, 17-year-old Marty McFly has a best friend, and his best friend is a disgraced nuclear scientist. And I shit you not, they don't even explain this." We're just like, who's his best friend? Disgraced nuclear scientist? Okay, proceed. It's so
and everyone knows
great.
About it. Marty's so principal is like, you hanging out with that Doc Brown again?
It's so funny.
They don't mention it. Why are they best friends? There's no family relation. It's just
best friends.
It just is.
Now, just like all great nerd deep lore stuff, of course, there's comic books to fill the gap. So if you didn't read the comic books, you're not going to know how they met and yada yada. But for casual movie watchers, this is just what it is. And we're like, all right, cool.
James, we've mentioned this in other movies before. Either give me a good, solid explanation and show me, don't tell me, or just don't explain it at all. Don't give me some exposition of why they're friends. Just, this is what it is, and I'll accept it on his face for a movie like this.
I will say, very Buckaroo Banzai-esque on that.
Yeah, that's a good
like, that is what it is. If you don't fucking like it, it's going to be a long ride. So get in the DeLorean or get out. But yeah, guitar, thematic of this opening montage. We have Huey Lewis in the News, Power of Love, a super iconic needle drop here where all those clocks are being tested out and Doc is on the phone. He's like, perfect. They're all 18 minutes slow or whatever. And he's like, and Marty's like, you mean to say it's 8:25? I'm late for school. Bam, 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 bam. So this whole montage sets up who Marty is, who his family is perfectly. Bookends it from the start of who Doc Brown is and how he lives his life. It's very chaotic. His garage is obviously very busy. There's a lot of experiments going on. There's a plutonium case underneath the bed. And on the news, there's like, someone stole a case of plutonium from. So you're like, okay, this is a lot happening right now.
Doc Brown's a national security risk. That's what we've learned through like the commentary on the radio and the TV news.
He's a problem. We get the opening montage. We get principal says you're a slacker. Marty wants to be a musician. He's afraid of rejection, that people aren't going to like his creative stuff. He says that there might not be a future for me, wink, if I can't figure out my stuff, and his girlfriend is there to console him. A nice little fun fact I like about this is that originally Melora Hardin was originally cast to play Jennifer. That's Jan from The Office.
No way.
You know, Michael Scott's like super CEO, like they always have a fling. She was originally cast and she shot during those 5 weeks with Eric Stoltz. The only reason they replaced her was because she was quote unquote too tall for Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox is a short king. He's 5'4". You know, he's just kind of like Kendrick Lamar. He's a low guy. He's Kevin Hart status. So they're looking at Melora Hardin and they're like, yeah. So they asked like the female creatives on the crew. They're like, would this happen? And back in the day, they're like, no. It's like, it's fine if it happens. But I guess on screen, they're like, all right, sorry, you're out. We're going to go with Claudia Wells. Jennifer's going to console him on being confident and pursuing his music career. He does try out for like a school talent show band. Yeah, so they actually play Huey Lewis in the news, The Power of Love. And Nick, we get a great cameo here. Who is judging him?
It's not the news, James, but it is Huey Lewis.
It's Huey. So that's fun. When they're walking through the town square, some lady says, save the clock tower, and like interrupts their sentimental moment. I think it's funny that this clock broke 30 years ago and the city didn't even try to fix it. Now there's a petition to keep it broken.
I love when a movie does this because we all know the clock tower getting struck by lightning plays a huge role in this movie at the end. And they just bring it up in something funny and comedic at the beginning of some crazy lady going, save our clock towers. Or what? You're like, what is this? And then later on, you're like, oh, the clock tower. And he grabs the flyer, and this flyer stays in his pocket, and then this plays a huge role. So classic. I know it's Zemeckis, but I know Spielberg also kind of has his hands.
Yeah, it's structured very strategically.
There's really no wasted energy, I'd say, in this movie.
And during this opening montage, Marty's skateboarding. His skateboard color scheme is reminiscent of the hoverboard that he'll have in part 2, which I thought was fun. He waves to like some aerobics class on the corner business, and we'll see him kind of pull a similar move when he goes back in time. So there's a lot of, again, just visual foreshadowing, which is great. Yeah, a lot of parallels. And I think in modern days, the common practice is to have a cold opening and then you slap the audience with a title. So I think right after this music montage, if this was a modern day movie, they'd probably hit you with the Back to the Future title right after he leaves the Hill Valley Square, because this montage has done a very good job of setting up who Marty is and what Hill Valley is like in the world we're in. And then we come home to meet the pushover dad and old Dick Biff, which, he's just getting clowned, dog. He's just getting straight up clowned.
You hate to see it. And so you realize Marty's life isn't great. His family's life isn't great, but Doc Brown is going to call Marty.
Oh my God.
At 1 a.m.
So
he's going to turn everything upside down.
Two things here. One, I don't know if this is true, but do you think he had him meet him in a mall parking lot at 1:30 a.m. because of Michael J. Fox's night shooting? I mean, obviously he had to shoot at night a lot, but could they not change the clock of the mall? And they're like, we'll just shoot it right at 1:30.
Oh, that's a really good call out. That's probably it.
I feel like they would be able to change the clock, but maybe because so this starts off like Doc Brown's like manic and just chaotic energy of just, he's like in the beginning opening oneer, he's like, Marty, I need you to meet me at 1:30 a.m. in the parking lot. And Marty's like, yeah, okay, Doc, like no problem. He calls him, he's sleeping. It's like 10:30. He's like, you didn't fall asleep, did you? He's like, no, I didn't. It's like, why does he need to meet him at 1:30? Can't we do this at a reasonable time?
But you're right. It actually does fit the manic nature of Doc Brown.
Scatterbrain.
Of Christopher Lloyd, of John Big Booty himself.
So I love Doc Brown's character. He's so manic. He's so chaotic. And for like all the unexplained stuff, his performance is what just kind of gives you a little slap across the face. Psh, psh, like snap out of it. It doesn't matter. Like this is what we're doing. So he sells it. He sells it super well. We're going to get our first look at the DeLorean, the time machine. And it's great.
It's great. It's a huge reveal. The owner of DeLorean, John DeLorean,
Cokehead,
actually reached out. He loved this movie. He said, thank you guys for using this and keeping my dream alive through this movie. But in the original script, this is not a DeLorean. This is not a car. It's actually a fridge, or it was supposed to be something you walk into like a Doctor Who phone booth. I don't know. I never watched the show. And then they're like, oh, what if it's a fridge? Then they were scared. We're going to get a bunch of kids watching this who end up trapping themselves in a fridge. But it was a fridge that was going to need some like a nuclear blast to do it. And all I could think about was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
And which is another connection.
And it's Spielberg.
Which I honestly think was discussed. And they said, we think this is what it is because that was the original idea from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
This is why Crystal Skull is what it is. So
you could see it all playing around.
It's related to a lot of movies that we watch, which is great.
So we get the DeLorean time machine. The first time we see the DeLorean time machine, this is actually the first time. I think we're about 18, 19 minutes into the movie. This is the first time we actually get a little bit of a score. So this is where Silvestri kind of comes into the movie here when the DeLorean pops up. And I think it's such a great choice because, like you said, we have Huey Lewis in the news. We have a lot of setup going on, but nothing important's happening. And you don't waste a score when nothing important's happening. And then the DeLorean gets revealed, and Silvestri just comes in and just hits you with it.
Drops.
And you're like, oh, the movie is starting now.
When it rolls out of the trailer, I don't know why. It always looks high def to me. It always looks good. It always looks like it's super held up and just, it's great. Einstein is Doc Brown's dog. As we know from Minutemen, the Disney Channel original movie we watched last year, which also featured time traveling, which had a lot of Back to the Future references. The pet cat was named Felinestein in honor of Einstein from this movie.
Yeah. Einstein was originally supposed to be a chimp.
Chimp.
But the folks at Columbia said nothing with a chimp has ever made money. And then they referenced another movie, and they said, that was an orangutan, my guy.
They referenced a Stallone movie, and they said, that was an orangutan. And that was actually Sid Sheinberg. So Sid Sheinberg, man, he's got the jokes.
All the cold takes.
So we see Einstein time travel 1 minute into the future. It's what's funny is that when they showed this to test audiences, they said that the crowd went silent when the DeLorean disappeared because they thought they just murdered the dog.
Marty in the movie was like,
he's like, you just melted Einstein. So they're like, there was not the reaction we were going for. And then when he's like, look out, and it's like, psh, 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 and then it comes back in. They see the car back. The dog is good. The crowd was like going crazy. And they're like, we fucking love this. So then they said, we got to move this up. We said, we can't, this is no longer a mid-July release. This is July 4th weekend.
The effects hold up. I can't imagine being in 1985 and seeing that and being like, what? There's one time where the first time travel, the tires leave strip of fire, and that one's CGI. Marty McFly standing in the fire, and you could definitely see like his shoe overlap the fire a little bit. But
I want to shout out a YouTube channel, The Deep Dive, featuring Eric Voss from New Rock Stars, and he actually calls this out. He says he loves that they keep this in even throughout all the remastering because it's a telltale sign that they had 9 weeks to edit this and put this out. So yeah. It's a sign of the times, of the time crunch and just the shit show production of this movie. And yeah, it looks really rough. Obviously, it sticks out. Obviously, they can go back and fix that whenever they want, but they just choose to leave it in.
Let it be.
It's very noticeable, though.
But all in all, the effects are still great. And for 1985 effects, I mean, Spawn was what, 97? And holy shit.
Awful. They didn't have ILM doing it.
Yeah, 85 and 9 weeks of editing. The effects on all of this are fantastic. It can't be said enough how well this movie stands up on the effects side.
Well, like you said, if you saw that in the 80s, it'd be pretty sick. When Doc Brown, halfway through the movie, he says the thing, and he says, "We need to send you back to the future." And then he like points to the camera. And he's kind of making eye contact, but then he like dazes off. And I was thinking, man, like, God, I wish I was there in 1985 watching this. This would have been like Avengers Endgame status. This would have been like Spider-Man No Way Home status. Fast Five was another memorable movie watching experience for me. Just like the whole crowd is into it. That would have been amazing. If there's a regret I have, it's not being born early enough to see this July 4th weekend in the theaters and having Christopher Lloyd point at the audience and say, "We got to send you back to the future," after I was totally sold on this movie from minute 5.
It was so good. But he wasn't quite into the camera. It's like when someone holds a camera and they go, "Look at the birdie over here." He was just
it was cheeky enough.
Off.
It was cheeky enough that we weren't breaking the fourth wall. Yeah, it was great.
And he's just crazy enough where you're like, "What are you looking at, Doc?"
Yeah,
like he's
works.
Just crazy enough. It was perfect.
Yeah. So Libyans show up because Doc Brown was supposed to steal plutonium for them.
I forget sometimes that this movie is supposed to be a lot of a comedy. Because you're like, oh, you're into it. You got the effects. You're like, oh, we're time traveling. And then he's like, the Libyans. The Libyans. In a Volkswagen bus. Just come at him.
A love bus, yeah. So, yeah, they come up with like an AK-47 RPG. They actually gun down Doc. Marty is in distress. I don't know where Einstein is in the situation, actually.
He's in the whatever pulled the trailer.
He's just in the truck? Okay.
He's in the truck and he barks and he goes, "What is it, boy?" And that's when he sees.
Oh yeah. And then the ladies roll up. Yeah. So Doc gets mowed down, and then Marty just hops in the DeLorean, and we get a little chase around the mall parking lot, and then he ends up going back in time because he hits 88 miles per hour. They do give us some exposition and say, "I only have one vial to make it back. I must be nuts. I got to grab the extra." And before they grab the extra vial to get back of plutonium, it's too late. The Libyans show up, and then we have an Avengers Endgame situation where, just like in that movie, they said we have one trip there, one trip back. We can't mess this up. Also, the plutonium vials look very similar to PIM particles in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I think might be a little bit on purpose.
Are you saying this movie was iconic in Hollywood and went ahead and informed a lot of things made after it? That's crazy, James.
What I'm also going to say is a quote from Avengers Endgame when they're talking about time travel and the mechanics of it, and how this movie doesn't really focus on the time travel mechanics. It's really just the story and what's happening on screen. But one of my favorite quotes from Endgame is when Paul Rudd says, "Wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that Back to the Future is just a bunch of bullshit?" It's that impressionable on Hollywood. It's that much parodied, spoofed, inspired by. But we don't have time for that. We have to go back in time because we're in 1955. We're going to get back. We're going to run into the younger parents. The first thing we're going to notice is that everything has changed in Hill Valley. They limit the action to this town square, which is the Universal Backlot. If you've ever done the Universal Backlot tour, you're going to be going through Hill Valley. And the first thing we do is run to a diner, and we're going to run into George McFly, which is Marty's dad. So they're the same age in this scenario. And Crispin Glover apparently was super problematic as an actor.
Problem, dude. Yeah. Everything I read, this guy was an issue on set.
Yeah. Like an absolute, just kind of like one of those actors I would be like, dude, this guy sucks because he's like, I got to method act, or I got to do my thing, or I don't think my character would do this. I think he would go over here. So butts heads with Robert Zemeckis. However, I would like to say Crispin Glover is absolutely fantastic in this. He is so good in this. Christopher Lloyd is so good in this. Crispin Glover is so good in this. Tom Wilson, who plays Biff Tannen, is so good in this. There's a lot of very strong performances happening on screen. Michael J. Fox is great in this, but those three alone carry the movie. Even if we didn't have a strong lead, even if it was Eric Stoltz, it would be carried from those three guys. But
yeah, apparently Crispin Glover was so nervous. Sometimes he would like get stage fright and have to mouth his lines, and they'd have to dub it over afterwards, and it would just add to the like anxious nerd can't get a word out sort of thing. So it worked out. But yeah, like you said, I saw one story where he suggested to Zemeckis, I think it should go this way. And apparently Zemeckis lost it. And Zemeckis, who seems like such a cool, chill guy, to see him lose it on a Crispin Glover in his makeup and everything I would pay money to see that.
Well, like when he walks into the diner and he needs to, say like, I'm your density scene. He says, all right, walk in there and tell, what's her face, how you feel. And then, he says, I don't think my character would open the door. I don't think he should open the door. He'd be too nervous. And Robert Zemeckis is like, open the fucking door. Like, we have to, this is what happens in the movie. I'm telling you to do this. Fucking open the door.
Yeah. It's the script, dude.
Well, speaking of going into this diner and mustering up courage to talk to Lorraine, aka Marty's mom. Marty's mom has the hots for Marty. And, I gotta say, pretty uncomfortable to watch in a lot of these scenes. I don't know if
she's a horn dog, dude.
Super horn dog.
The first night she meets him, she's like, he should stay in my room tonight.
I think the fun part about this movie is that it's a juxtaposition of parents and their expectations of kids, but they're pretty much hypocrites, and they play on the idea of like the 50s were so pure and nice and clean. But when we go back in the 50s, it's like, it's really not. There's racial tension. There's slurs being thrown around. There is heavy rape action going on. It wasn't a squeaky clean, like white glove Timmy Ginger. It was just it was a rough time back then. It was divided. It was sexist. It was misogynistic. It wasn't squeaky clean, as they say. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause his mom in the opening of the movie says, a girl should never make the move on a guy.
Or like, I would never be up at a lake, like kissing a guy. I would never do this. I've never drank. I never smoke.
Then we see the young version of her smoking, drinking, making moves.
Alcoholic.
Oh,
off that sauce.
She's pouring at the opening of the movie. She's just pouring a glass of vodka.
Yeah,
not like a cocktail glass of vodka. We're talking like a drinking glass.
Like, well, George, I guess from a deleted scene, but he like pours just a shit ton of peanut brittle in a bowl, and it's like that's just going to be his dinner, I guess. And there was a deleted scene that like a baseball kid and his parent needed to sell peanut brittle to raise money, and they just made George McFly buy all of it because he's a pushover. But I was like, why is George wolfing down peanut brittle, and Lorraine is just in the kitchen just drinking a martini? Like those were the days when he would just sweep me off my feet and kiss me. And then he's like a total nerd now. He recessed back to his starting form, unfortunately.
Yeah, this sucks. But we're in the past, and Marty doesn't know what to do, but he knows he can go see Dr. Emmett Brown. So he does go find Doc, convinces him that he's from the future, sharing some information, explains that he needs 1.21 gigawatts.
Mispronounced,
could be gigawatts, which is 1 billion watts. Doc freaks out and says, well, the only thing that could do that is a bolt of lightning. But we don't know when lightning's going to strike. Well, guess what?
Yes,
we have a flyer. We have a flyer for when lightning's going to strike the clock tower. And guess what? It's on Saturday. This Saturday. There's a lot of convenience in this movie, but I give it 100% pass because that's just the movie that it is. So it doesn't bother me at all. But yeah, so he says, in the meantime, don't change your future. He goes, my mom's already in love with me. So
going back to the time travel mechanics and how this is not supposed to be anywhere near scientifically accurate if time travel was even a thing. But we have a photo of him and his siblings, and it's the classic, they're fading away because the timeline is being altered. So if you could actually time travel, I think a lot of people would disagree. This is how it would go. Like, if anything, the paper you're holding would not even exist because
the picture wouldn't have been taken.
Yeah, the picture wouldn't be taken. If it was taken, it might have been taken at a totally different time. So why would you have it? It's a movie mechanic to give the audience an hourglass of how much time we have left to accomplish our mission, and it's a visual indicator of how much urgency should be paid attention to this matter, and it's a signifier. It's a visual signifier. It's not supposed to be scientific at all.
And it's a great signifier for an audience to realize what's going on.
We have a goal in mind, and then we also have a problem because Marty has already altered the past, because in the beginning, Lorraine said George maybe got hit by the car, and then she kissed him and whatever. But then we see Marty actually inserts himself into that role, and then he's throwing off the space-time continuum. He's going to make a new timeline. The picture's telling us that they're fading away. Of course, he's the last one to fade away for whatever reason.
Time's creeping that way.
It's funny, yeah, because his brother's head is like disappearing. It's like when those things like you turn upside down and like the pens, and then they like reveal the image.
Yes.
They would just disappear in an instant, or they'd be there or not at all.
It's like, oh, we've lost 10% of them. Like, he's creeping out.
So again, it's a movie tool. While Doc Brown's going to work on the science experiment of getting Marty back to his timeline, and he now understands that he has made something that works, and now it's his divine calling that he needs to continue this mission to uphold what is supposed to happen. Marty does try to tell him that he's going to get killed the night of when he goes back in time. But Doc Brown's like, I don't want to know. I don't want to alter the timeline. We can't do this. Like, don't tell me anything.
Doc's the only one who respects time travel.
So Marty has to make sure his parents fall in love. We get a lot of great things happening in the movie where Biff is interrupting. He's a big bully. Tom Wilson, again, just can't say enough. He is super great in this. The iconic skateboard scene where he chases Marty around the town square. He takes some kid's scooter and rips off the wood box and makes a skateboard out of it. And Tony Hawk actually credits this movie deeply. He says this is a very important movie because it got a lot of kids, a whole generation of kids, wanting to pick up a skateboard. And he thinks it's funny that, Marty is kind of the reason that skateboarding became a thing. Makes me think of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, how when they went back to the siege of Syracuse, they said they have dragons. It's because they brought in these World War II airplanes in. So Indiana Jones has his mark on history, and dragons are only a thing because Indiana Jones went back in time and had that effect on that story and that piece of history, just like Marty going back in time. And skateboarding is a thing because it was a thing already in Marty's timeline, but he kind of invented it in this new timeline, which is fun.
You get the time paradox, and you just don't think about it.
Yeah, don't think about it. He pulls a similar move when he waves to the people in the diner, just how he did in the opening montage when he's sketching on the back of a truck. So sketching. a lot of parallels happening, shenanigans, and we're trying to court George and Lorraine back together, even though she's madly in love with Marty, aka Calvin Klein, because she read it off his underwear. Why did she take his pants off, Nick?
She a horn dog, brother.
She horned up.
She's horned up. But it's time to get ourselves back to the future. So after we get his parents back together at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, which there was no Under the Sea theme to this dance. They just called it that.
There's a mermaid statue at like the drink punch table.
There's a mermaid statue.
There's like seaweed
it's the 50s. It's the 50s. They didn't know what they were doing. So it's completely fine. You get the iconic Marty playing his guitar.
Marvin
Johnny
Berry.
B. Good. And then Marvin Berry calls his brother
It's your cousin, Marvin Berry. It's like, okay, we got it. We got it.
I love that. Because his hands all fucked up. Yeah. You're looking for that new sound?
It would sound so shitty on a 50s telephone.
Just be like, rah, 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 rah. I'm gonna be Chuck Berry now. It's like, all right,
Yeah, I'm gonna do the duck walk. Oh my
but
gosh.
it's time that we have our whole plan. Doc has rigged up the whole town square to act as a conduit for the lightning bolt, so that when Marty gets up to his 88 miles an hour in the DeLorean, he can be sent back home. Marty does slip a little note that says "Don't open till 1985." And so he is going to tell him how he dies, but he's like, okay, I won't ruin the future until 1985 because I don't want to influence everything that's happened till this time. And
But
it's
Doc
time to
finds
jump
it.
back to the future.
And Doc finds it and rips it up. He's
Yeah.
like, I don't want to know. So we're like, oh, okay. So now the peril's back in the game. We're like, he might still die. Might still bite the dust.
And there's a lot of like almost in this scene where like Doc's climbing up the clock tower. He's like, oh, I can't get these together. And then he does, then he goes back down and he can't plug another thing together. And you're like, oh.
And then Marty's trying to start up the DeLorean. And then the only other nitpick I had was they called this an electric vehicle, but it has like the trouble turning over sound effect. I was like, that's an internal combustion. So I was like, all right, whatever. Oversight.
There's a lot of times too where he's like hitting the clutch, hitting the gas. You can hear it. And apparently the DeLorean was so small because of all the props. He's like scraping his knuckles on everything as he's shifting. And you can like hear it like hitting as he's like hitting the gears. But it does work because, of course, Doc doesn't fail and Marty don't fail. We get the old gotcha on Doc's death. So he got shot up by the Libyans just before we left in the DeLorean. When we get back, Doc's all shot up, but he taped the letter back together and he did wear himself a bulletproof vest and he's good to go. And Marty goes, well, I thought about what about messing with the future? And Marty gave him a line, but when he gave him the letter and said, sometimes you have to take that risk. And I thought Doc was going to say, sometimes you got to take that risk. But Doc said, I just thought, what the hell? And you're like, oh,
he just says,
it's just okay, Doc.
Which totally caps off the whole approach to this movie, which is just like, we're not here to explain it. Don't get bogged down in the mechanics. Just enjoy the ride and enjoy the story.
His parents become successful. Biff works for his dad now. His dad's super confident because in the past he knocked out Biff with one punch. And so the whole relationship's changed. They're successful. It's all good. So it's like it's kind of okay to mess with the past, apparently. Like things worked out for the better. And then Doc shows up from the future. He heads back in time, sees Marty and Jennifer, his girlfriend, who did not play a big part in this movie, and goes, Marty, you got to come with me. There's a problem in the future. And he goes, well, I'm hanging out with Jennifer. It's like, bring her too. It involves your kids. And you're like, oh, we're setting up a sequel. And then the old famous line, like, what about the road? Where we're going, we don't need roads. So he retrofitted this thing to the future. Wheels pop up. He flies off. Finn. And
we hit credits.
We hit the credits. And James,
Nick,
you have something about the credits.
I want to bring up a new tradition. I want us to both be on the lookout for the funniest names we find in the credits. I already did the work for you. Nick, the funniest names I found in the credits are Dick Babin, Bones Howe, Steve Suits, Robert Weatherwax, Richard Calkins, a.k.a. Dick Calkins, and Buck Flower, who is who played the bum at the end when Marty comes back to the
he's just sleeping on the newspapers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's Buck Flower.
Good for
so
Buck.
Nick, I just want to talk about the ending very quickly. Here's your clickbait, by the way. Eric Stoltz and Crispin Glover were right. They were so right. They disagreed with this ending. Crispin Glover hated that George McFly became a materialistic douchebag. And he's like, money shouldn't be the reward. It should be love. That should be a reward. Eric Stoltz is like, this would be horrific. This would be a nightmare if I came back to an altered timeline. I don't have memories anymore. And this is a totally different family. And the world I know is different. I would have to adjust. They are right. However, they're also wrong. Because this movie is not about the happy ending that the family is better off and whatnot. Because I credit the deep dive channel, Eric Voss, he had a great takeaway of this movie. It's not a time travel movie. It's not about fixing the past to make yourself into a better future. This is all about the Marty McFly and Doc Brown relationship. Doc Brown is nothing without Marty. Marty becomes nothing without Doc Brown, because they set each other up for this grand adventure that we're about to see on a part 2 and part 3. And when we get back to that happy ending, that the big 4x4 Toyota truck that Marty McFly didn't earn at all, Doc Brown comes ripping out of the sky and says, we created a problem now. Like, all your success and your spoiled, pampered life has led to your kids being who they are. And we'll learn in part 2. They're just kind of like wimpy pieces of shit because of their upbringing. So I love that this movie is all about altering time, and it's not necessarily a good thing that they did that. It's just now a thing they have to deal with. And it's all about Doc Brown and Marty McFly navigating this mess they created, because this movie is very similar to the relationship of Rick and Morty, which is an Adult Swim cartoon. It started out as a parody of this movie, and Rick and Morty is great because they actually do go there. This is more of like a fun family comedy romp, whereas Rick and Morty does explore the dark sides of altering different universes and different timelines. They Cronenberg their original universe in like season 1, and then they have to go to an alternate universe and they kill
themselves,
their alternate versions, and then they have to pretend and insert themselves into that alternate timeline that like they don't have the memories that those ones have, and they have to pretend like their sisters and brothers and family members are who they knew, even though everything they knew is different and dead. So Rick and Morty is great for that reason. This movie is also great because it's super fun and fantastic, and it's a well-constructed movie. But I just want to say that they were right that the victory at the end is not the happy ending for the family. It's just the developing relationship, how Marty saved Doc Brown and gave him a purpose back in 1955 that he is going to build towards something that's going to work. And now he has to do that in order for this time loop hole to close.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And I'd also say his parents' relationship and who his parents were wasn't really a main conflict that needed to be fixed in this movie. It's very much in what we know about Spielberg. It's kind of a serial in a way where it's like, it's just a story that picks up. It is this adventure. I mean, really the flaw in Marty is he doesn't believe in himself. He doesn't want to deal with his music, and that doesn't get fixed. So we don't really have a main conflict to be fixed in this movie. We just have a really fun adventure, and things change, and it is what it is. So I don't really think there's a lesson to be learned by his parents turning out differently than they did. I think if you do that, you kind of miss the whole fun of the movie.
I think if I can respond to that, I think it's just showing that you and your parents are not so different. It's like when your parents are, like, let's say, like, you know, your parents go through a divorce and they're like, oh, like, I'm starting to date now, I'm really nervous. And then like, you kind of look at your parents, you're like, wow, you're just like a older version of me. Like, you're not like a person that knows everything and has their life together. You're just a regular person.
Yeah.
So when Marty experiences insecurity and doubt about his music, when he goes back in time, he learns that his dad is a science fiction writer, and he doesn't let anybody read his stories because he's afraid of rejection and that no one's going to like it. And then Marty's like, well, that's stupid. Why don't you just let someone read it? Like, what's the worst that can happen? So that is a lesson to learn from his dad, that they are similar. They have similar fears, and that's what ends
Marty
up.
wouldn't let people hear his music, his demo tape. Yeah.
All in all, it is very Raiders adjacent. It is just like a fun spectacle thrill ride. But if you dig deep enough, there is a story in there, which I appreciate.
But like you said at the top of this, it was Zemeckis and Gale saying, we're just guys being dudes making a fun story. And it is what it is, man. It's not that deep. You don't have to look into it and be like, oh, it's a bad message. It's like, what message, man? Like, I don't know. This is a really fun romp, and it's a great time. But James, let's talk about that a little more. Let's get ourselves into our talking points like we usually do after our plot talk. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
And this might be a little difficult.
Not for me.
I want you to keep it nice and succinct. Let's not get too crazy here, but in your view, because this movie's been broken down every which way to Sunday. But for you, James, in your own opinion, what is it that makes this movie so damn iconic?
Everything. It's everything. This is a perfect example of everything coming together at the right time in a perfect way. Because we have the DeLorean, which was not a stellar sports car back in the day. The owner of the company was getting arrested every other night for being high on coke. Underperforming vehicle. They wanted to make the time machine a fridge. That would have been stupid. Instead, they make this sick looking sports car, which is not necessarily good, but this movie makes it cool. And John DeLorean owes his entire bag to this fucking movie. Like this movie saved his legacy, honestly. Because I look at a DeLorean and I'm like, I would love to have one of those one day. Maybe mod it into an EV. So it's actually electric and it actually is fast and it actually doesn't break down. But the DeLorean is cool. Michael, just the brave and not virtuous, just the bold move of having to sit down Eric Stoltz and say, look, like you're not that guy. This is not the movie we want to make. Sorry. Go and like having the guts to go get Michael J. Fox and make this movie what it is. That's what makes this memorable. Alan Silvestri, when he came on, and like you said, there was a lot of skepticism of him coming on the project. And Spielberg, even himself, was like, I don't know. Like, John Williams is my guy. I don't know if he can get that regal fanfare that we're all looking for based on like Romancing the Stone, Chips, Starsky and Hutch. And then Alan Silvestri just is like, hold up, dog. Let me take the gloves off and watch me fucking cook, and gives us his best score of his career. That works. Christopher Lloyd through the
largest orchestra up to date in Hollywood, 85-piece orchestra for a movie. Just said, fuck it.
Christopher Lloyd threw the script away. He's like, I don't want to do this. And then I think his wife convinced him, like, you got to do this. He carries the movie. Crispin Glover, as much of a problem as he was a super delight for me in this movie. I thought he was absolutely stellar in this role. Tom Wilson, absolutely great in this role. Leah Thompson, I'll shout you out too. Leah, you were great in this role too. It's really just like that. Yes, it's everything coming together. Robert Zemeckis is proving himself to be a great director. Alan Silvestri proves himself to be a great composer. Everyone gave this movie their own take on their performances, and I think it's just the energy, the tone, the fuck it attitude. It's what makes this movie charming and just all around darling with audiences, in my opinion.
I love that take, man, because I definitely agree with you on that. I would say something that really stands out for what makes it so great, and I noticed this through research, and I noticed it through the movie too, is just the attention to detail. And I think this is a Spielberg as executive producer sort of thing, something that he instills in people underneath him, which is there's no wasted lines. There's everything matters in a movie. Like you said, the opening shot with the clocks, there's a guy hanging off a clock tower. There's a payoff at the end of it. Save our clock tower. There's a payoff at the end of it. Something fun that I read about, and then I went back and rewatched it. The mall is called Twin Pines at the beginning of the movie. And then after Marty runs through it and crashes through it, it's called Lone Pines at the end of the movie. And it's not focused on, it's something in the background because one of the pines was taken down. And it's the little things. And it's not, that itself doesn't make it a good movie, but the Twin Pines to Lone Pines. But when you have people who take care of a story and love a story and nurture a story to that level of detail, it always comes out well. When you have everybody there who's willing to say, hey, we're going to scrap 6 weeks of shooting because it doesn't fulfill the vision, and everyone's on board and says, yeah, we're going to get this guy and we're going to work around his crazy schedule. We're going to work around Michael J. Fox's schedule because that is what's best for this script. That's what makes something great. When everyone's there with a shared vision that says, hey, we're going to put our all into this. We're not going to leave any stone unturned. We're going to make sure everything has a payoff. This script is tight. The actors are the best actors that could be for this role. We will recast. We will reshoot. We will do everything in our power to make sure this all works. It's an attention to detail that I think Spielberg's just become known for. And then everyone under him sort of gravitates into that field of, hey, you can't half-ass a movie. You have to be all in, and everyone needs to be bought into this script and care about it. So, that's it for me. It's the level of care and attention and love that a story gets that really makes it work.
Yeah, that's a fun Easter egg, and you have to have a keen eye to pick that up. Speaking of, there is a fun Easter egg in Deadpool and Wolverine when they go back to Wade Wilson's timeline and they're in that subway station. There's actually a stop for Lone Pine Mall, which is a shout out to Back to the Future, because they're alternating timelines and different universes. So that's a fun Easter egg there. I think the most random fun fact Easter egg it's not my favorite, but it's just so random. So Buck Flower, the guy I shouted out for a funny name, who played the bum, in the 1985 timeline, there's a movie theater, and in the background, I don't know if you've noticed this, on the marquee, it says Orgy American Style. It's a porno theater. Buck Flower starred in that movie. He was an adult actor, and he plays the bum in the 1985 timeline. I'm like, what kind of Easter egg is that? I don't know, but I love it.
It's that, man. It's that level of, oh, we have an extra. I saw a few things like that where, oh, this one side character played in a movie where her name was this, so they added that name into the movie. And you have to really care about your actors and the people on the lot and, even the extras in the movie, and say, hey, we're going to incorporate this because this movie is for all of us and we love everybody on this staff. And again, I think that's what makes a movie that great. When you say, hey, everybody's involved. As someone who's led teams at work, and you've led teams at work, when you show you care, everyone on the job steps it up just a little bit. And it always shines. And like you said, Zemeckis and Silvestri, like, he knows that's his guy. Like, you took a chance on me, I'm going to put in 175% effort because I'm your guy. That matters. Stuff like that always shines through. Even if it's not in obvious ways, the end product always comes out better when everyone on the staff is on the same page.
Also, shout out Mr. Peabody and Sherman, because that is another Easter egg. Because speaking of Lone Pine Mall, when it's Twin Pines Mall, there's a guy named Mr. Peabody who had that entire mall property as like pine trees or something, like a farm. And then when Marty goes back into the past, he runs over one of Mr. Peabody's trees, and then that's why it becomes Lone Pine Mall.
Yeah.
And Mr. Peabody and Sherman are the time-traveling duo from the Rocky and Bullwinkle shorts. So it's all just riddled with Easter eggs.
Man. It's detail.
It's stuff for the audience. It's stuff for the audience to pick up on.
Absolutely. Now, James, I'm going in a separate direction now, and we're going to fight the urge for the love, the nostalgia. We just said everything is what made it perfect. Well, I want you to go ahead and swim upstream here. Is there anything in this movie? I want you to give me something that you didn't like about this movie. And I don't want you to say like, oh, this didn't age well. Nothing about the effects, not the PC stuff, right? There was some racism, some misogyny, like it's 1985, 1955. We accept that. But from a movie making standpoint, what is it that you say, you know what, people overlook this, but this is actually a bad part of this movie?
Man, that's tough because a lot of this movie is very great. It's structured very, very well. It's complete entertainment. It's super fun. Like I said before, I think just like the awkward, got the hots for my son, got the hots for my mom was like very cringeworthy to me. I didn't like it. I know it was supposed to be funny. I didn't think it was delivered in the best fashion because it just made me uncomfortable. I wanted to leave the room during those scenes. I was like I get that it's a joke, but we're not playing it off as haha. We're playing it off as like we're getting into Pornhub. We're getting into Buck Flower territory here. I don't like this.
When it culminates in that kiss in the car, it's like I could see audiences going like, "Oh,
yeah."
Like,
well, it's just like when we found out Luke and Leia were siblings. They're like, "What? Oh, wait a minute! They kissed in the other movie."
It's like the angel heart scene where you're just like, no, like no,
stop it. So that didn't. I don't even know if it just. I don't even think it aged at all. It was never good for me.
It's just like I didn't need it. I didn't need their love story that in depth.
Yeah, but as far as like corniness, you know, like we say we watch a lot of movies and it's like that's just 80s cheese. That's the charm. I don't think there's any of that here. I think it's sold. Ooh. Well, I think it's sold so well with the performances and just like the eccentric world that we're in. But if you have something different, lay it on me.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that. I would say in the hour 50 runtime, I would say the final hour 35.
Oh, actually,
is
no,
fantastic.
yeah. I hold on. When Doc Brown is fumbling so much at the clock tower, I was like, okay, like I get that he's a little bit extra. That was the one time. Where they kind of went overboard on like the like kind of
gasp. Gasp. Gasp.
Yes. I'll take it back. I'll walk it back. But that's the only thing that I think is like a little bit overdone and a little bit like we get it. But a lot of it I didn't really have an issue with.
Yeah. See, I think the worst part of this movie is the first 15 minutes. It's not the Huey Lewis thing. I think that's a great montage and like the Marty, but the accentuating how nerdy his dad is, how alcoholic his mom is, I'm in a high school band. Oh, I'm tardy. It was very 80s cheese. It felt very like, okay, if I was in a theater watching this for the first time in 1985, I'd say, oh, it's another one of these movies. And then at the 18-minute mark, when the DeLorean pops out and Silvestri gets his score going, the whole movie picks up. And the final hour and a half of this movie is a masterpiece. But I'd say that first 15 minutes does a decent job setting up the character, but it's a little too much. And it feels like it's stuff that's left over from initial drafts where, oh, you need to send your tape in. You're going to be a successful guitar player. There's no payoff for like for that story. And like, so that whole, like, I'm a guitar player. I know it ends up paying off.
Him like, you know, ripping strings on the stage during the school dance and everyone's like digging it. I think that's the payoff.
It's not like he ever sends his tape in. It's not like he's like, oh, I finally have the confidence now to succeed in that kind of payoff. So like the first 15 minutes is just super 80s cheese, and it's fine because at first you see it and then you forget about it because the last hour and a half of this movie is so damn good.
I would disagree that there's no payoff because, you know, he's afraid of rejection, and then it's time for him to clutch up and play Earth Angel and Johnny Be Good in order for the dance to go on, because his altered timeline, the guitarist sliced his hand, so now he needs to step into that role, and he's like, his confidence is shaken from Huey Lewis saying, "You're just too darn loud." So I think there is a bit of a payoff. Yeah, it's not specifically, he's like, I got a record label. You know, it's like,
but his picture was already coming back before he did that. Like his parents were already getting back together.
But it started fading away again because he got George to ask Lorraine out to dance, but they needed to kiss, so he needed to like continue to play the song. Yeah, and
but like if he really shredded and killed it, he would have just made Lorraine more in love with him. So he kind of failed because everybody was like,
because she already kissed him and said, it seems like I'm kissing my brother. So she was turned off.
All I'm saying is the first 15 minutes were a little like All right, 80s cheese kind of thing. And then the last hour and a half takes off and you're like, wow, this is unique. This is perfect. This is awesome. I'm trying to find a flaw in this movie. That's what the question's about. Like,
Yeah.
really get critical. And if I had to, it's that first 15 minutes for me.
Yeah. I think they just like walk with it in stride so well. It goes under the radar for me, but if I were to, if someone were to say, open your eyes, James, like it's cheese, and I'd be like, yeah, I could see it.
Yeah.
I think it's just
open your eyes, James. Take a look at it.
It's just so good. Nick, we've discussed the movie. It is now time to hit our awards. This is going to culminate to the end of the year wrap party. It is Mini Pops. Just like always, we are going to start out with the best weapon. And Nick, I think it has to be one of those Libyan weapons that rolled up to the scene. Is it the AK-47 or the RPG? What do you think?
The RPG never really got a kill count. Marty sped away before they could line up the RPG.
Potential.
The guy did.
Potential.
Oh, I mean, potential. I mean, that lightning strike could kill some guy. But
Or
I mean, the
AK-47, I think.
I'd say the Libyan's AK. Yeah, that thing was
Libyan's
vicious.
AK-47 is the best weapon of this movie. Nick, who did we decide as the best fighter? It was a little bit of just throwing hands and shenanigans, but who's going into the dome at the end of the year?
It's got to be Biff.
Big Biff.
He's the bully. He does throw down quite a bit. He does get popped. He does get popped by
couple times
Marty's dad
by
there.
both McFlys. Yeah.
Yeah, he does wear it by some McFlys, but overall, he is the town bully. He does wreck a few things, so he's just a brawler. Biff's a brawler, so
He's trying to wreck Lorraine in the car.
that was a weird scene. I didn't like that scene.
Nobody did.
After he pulls Marty out, and he's just like, come here. You're like, oh,
I'm gonna get you.
Yeah, she's like, no, stop, and he's like, You're like, oh, the 50s. I forgot.
Very grapey. This is going to bring us to our MVC of the movie, the most valuable character. We are going to nominate Doc Brown. Pretty easy.
100%.
Easy winner here.
100%.
Yeah, he just, again, I think the Marty McFly, Doc Brown relationship is what is the story in this movie. And Doc Brown, for me, is just everything he does in this movie is great. The only thing that I get a little bit extra on the bumbling on the top of the clock tower, but that was just Zemeckis and Spielberg giving that, like you said, the 80s cheese of suspense. But Doc Brown, NBC, easy.
100%.
Easy.
No question from me.
Nick, who's our biggest piece of shit of this movie?
It's Biff Tannen. He's grapey.
Yeah.
He's mean. He's the bully. He's all of the above. He's just a bad
plays
guy.
It so Tom Wilson plays it so punchable
so
face.
well.
But man, he is great in this. Our final award, Mini Pop, is going to be for the best yeet. What's it going to be?
James, my nomination for this one is in the opening scene when Marty gets into Doc's garage and he amps up his guitar and he throws it into maximum overdrive and he has everything
Maximum
turned
overdrive.
up. And if you're in a theater watching this, all of the feedback, the noise feedback from the amps, you're like, what did I get myself into? This is kind of hurting my ears. And he hits that first chord. Well, first off, he pulls out his shiny metal pick. And you get a little kind of like shing moment. And he hits the first chord on his guitar and it blows him back about 20 feet, yeets him all the way back, knocks over all of Doc's shelves, causes an absolute mess. But it is quite the yeet across Doc's garage.
And it's our best yeet of Back to the Future from 1985. First Mini Pops of the year. How exciting. Like we never left. I'm so happy to be here. Let's bring this home. We're going to hit this with our sarcastic selling points, followed by the final review. I'll go first. My sarcastic selling point is precursor to Rick and Morty. I don't really think there's another.
I had the same thing. I said live action Rick and Morty.
You need this 2025 knowledge to like reverse engineer these sarcastic selling points because we know more than they knew back then.
Yeah, and to be honest, this is a really first of its kind movie. It's a first of its kind movie.
just like Marty going back in time and influencing, like he invented skateboarding, I'm saying Rick and Morty went back in time and influenced Back to the Future.
Final review. Fight.
It is time for the final review. Let's wrap this puppy up. We're going to start out with what the other guys think, and we're going to transition into what we think. Starting out with Rotten Tomatoes, 93% of the critics thought that this was a pretty good movie.
Yeah, and higher from the people at a 95%.
God damn. Metacritic, this is the average weighted scores of the critics from now, or from then until then. We'll talk about time. Back to the Future. They're giving this an 87. So 8.7 on the popcorn scale.
Yeah, pretty low for the critics, but the people, again, are higher at a 9.0.
Man, some high praise for this old school movie. And now for our Power of Love, Clock Tower Above. 1.21 gigabyte score from IMDb.
Not brought to you by
Coca-Cola and
8.5.
Man, Nick, I think this is, at least as far as we've been tracking it, the highest rated movie from those collective scores at a 90.
Yeah, well, IMDb loves hedging their bets on this shit. So an 8.5 from IMDb, that's good. I would love to know what's a 9 and a 10 on IMDb, but I also don't want to know, so I'm not looking it up.
Maybe we'll hit that, but before we do, we're going to hit you with our laughable log lines, our popcorn points, and final thoughts. Nick, I will go first. I gave you the 8.6 at the beginning. Let's see if that changes in any sort of which way, because my laughable log line is: insane senior citizen scientist Doc Brown makes enemies with terrorists and sends his best friend, 17-year-old Marty McFly, back in time to get horned up by his mom. And Nick, I gave this a conservative 8.6 in the beginning, just like what's his face, Michael J. Fox character on Family Ties. He was a little conservative boy, but I'm getting pretty liberal and wiggly up here because I'm going to slap this with an 8.9. This is quite the joyride. I think it's like we said, he said, what makes this movie charming? It's everything that happens on screen. It's the score. It's the performances. It's the outrageous plot. It's we don't need to get bogged down in the mechanics of this movie. We just need to enjoy the ride. When you walk away from a movie and you're thinking, what was the story? And you're like, I don't know, but I had a good time. You could say that about this movie, but like we discussed, if you do look hard enough, there is a very heartwarming story of a loving relationship with an adopted father and an adopted son, and their relationship and their bond, and how they are each other's density, aka destiny, in order for their purpose in life and their success and their adventures. And that will only grow as we proceed in the rest of this trilogy. Can't speak enough to the performances, the underdogness of the directors, the writers, the gutsy moves from behind the scenes. They just made a super memorable project, and this movie is an all-timer. I absolutely love this movie. It's not in the 9s because it's not it's not flawless. Obviously, you can point out scientific plot holes here and there, but my God, is this going to work with the movie making magic and just the craftsmanship of Hollywood film producing. 8.9 for me. Hit me.
I love that, James. All right. Time for your boy. All right, my laughable log line is simply this. A 17-year-old is best friends with an old man who makes a time machine out of a sports car. And that 17-year-old goes back in time and soaks his mom's bannies.
Hey, that's the same as mine.
It's close. It's close. James, you went up by 0.3, and I decided from my 8.8 to go also up by 0.3. James, this is a 9.1. This is in the 9s.
Wait, what? What?
Oh,
that's insane.
I know,
that's
buddy.
crazy.
I know. This is one of your favorite franchises.
I won't be mad
and I'm higher than you, which I was a little surprised by. But
wow,
no, yeah. I disagree with you that this shouldn't be in the 9s. I absolutely think that this is in the nines, low nines, but 9.1. And it's all the things we've said. I don't need to rehash it. It's the attention to detail, man. We gave a lot of shit to Scheinberg in this episode about what his suggestions were, but at the end of the day, he still gave the power to Spielberg and the creatives.
Power of love.
And he didn't change a bunch of stuff. No, I love it. He didn't change a bunch of stuff. He made suggestions. They said no, and he said okay. And he sat back and he did what we always want executives to do on this show. We always say, let the creatives cook because they're good at it. And he let them. And it's good. And yeah, there's scientific plot holes, but I don't need all that to be explained. I don't need my movies to be scientifically correct because, James, I don't fully understand science. So what am I going to do with the perfectly scientific correct movie? Like, sometimes you just make a damn good movie. There are some dings. Like I said, the beginning's very cheesy. That was my one, like, if I had to ding this movie, I'd say the beginning really felt like a setup for another 80s high school teen movie. And then they flip the script. They go nuts. They say, we're unique. Zemeckis and Gale cooked with this script. So I think this is an easy 9.1. And good Lord, talk about starting off the season. We do this when we do the franchises of the year. Starting off a season with just the highest of bars. And James, I know how much you love this franchise.
It's fun.
I've never expressed my love for this franchise, but I love this franchise too.
It's super fun. It's
so good.
It's like a comfort. It's like comfort food in cinema form.
It's everything that a lot of movie making has lost, and I wish it would get back to.
I love that. And I love that I was a little bit more restrained, and I don't want to get too out of the box here, but Nick, you're pulling a Doc Brown and you're going crazy right now. And I'm like, Nick, you just gave Back to the Future a 9.1 out of a DeLorean?
It's 9.1 gigawatts, brother.
Let's go. Hey, I won't be mad at that. If anything, that makes me happier because that just raises the average score to a 9. Just Play It gives Back to the Future, the first one, a 9. That is amazing. And like you said, what a way to start out the year. Probably can only go down from here, buddy. So hopefully you guys stick with us. Hopefully you're following us. We talked about
it. Do you want your best work to be at the beginning?
Yeah, we're starting out great. Hopefully you're going to stick with us on this downhill ride, and hopefully you're following us. We are at Just Play It Podcast on Instagram and YouTube, at Just Play It Pod on X, and we're going to be with you the entire year, and you're definitely going to want to join us next time because there's going to be quite a large problem in Little Szechuan, I'll say.
Oh, James, there's going to be just a slight bit of issues in a communist territory.
And y'all won't know what we're talking about unless you're there. So hit us back in 2 weeks and we'll see you there. So for right now, we're hopping in the DeLorean. We're going down this road of this franchise of the year. We are heading gone. And remember, if you make friends with the scientist and he sends you back in time, don't cross paths with your parents because you're going to get in a super awkward love triangle.
Oh, geez, Doc. Calm down, Marty. Calm down, Marty. Oh, Marty. Oh, man.
Oh, you just got that?
Yeah, I did.